My name is Lakeisha Elliott. I'm 21 now. But this story starts when I was 15, the year my mother met the man who slowly erased me. My dad died when I was 8, a heart attack at 42. One day he was teaching me how to ride a bike in our driveway, jogging beside me, with one hand hovering near the seat, like he could stop the whole world from tipping. 3 months later, I was wearing an itchy black dress at his funeral, while relatives I barely knew patted my shoulder and said things about heaven that felt like static in my ears. I didn't want a better place. I wanted my dad. For 7 years after that, it was just me and Mom. We lived in Dad's house, a modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs that was paid off, thanks to his life insurance. Mom worked as an administrative assistant at a medical supply company. Steady checks, nothing fancy. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We had routines. Friday movie nights with popcorn in the same chipped bowl. Breakfast for dinner on Wednesdays. Summer camping trips to the state park where Mom swore she loved sleeping on the ground, even though she complained the whole time and always accidentally forgot the bug spray. She used to keep Dad alive for me. We'd go through photo albums together, and she'd point out details like she was worried I might forget. "See that goofy hat?" she'd say, tapping the picture. "He wore that thing everywhere until I finally threw it away." We laughed. We cried sometimes too. But we were a team, Mom and me against the world. Then Richard Lawson happened. They met at some work conference. He owned a pharmaceutical distribution company. Serious money, luxury car, a house in one of those neighborhoods where the HOA will fine you for leaving your trash cans out too long. Everything about him screamed upgrade from our quiet middle-class existence. Mom started acting differently almost immediately. New clothes, new hairstyle, suddenly interested in wine tastings and country clubs. She'd come home from dates talking about Richard's vacation home in Colorado, his boat, his connections, like she'd discovered a secret level of life she hadn't known existed. At first, she tried to include me. She invited me to dinners with Richard, suggested we do activities together, said things like, "I really want you two to get to know each other." Richard would show up in his expensive car, shake my hand with that firm businessman grip, and ask generic questions about school. "How are your grades? Playing any sports?" The kind of questions adults ask when they're obligated to show interest but don't actually care about the answer. I could tell he saw me as part of a package deal he wasn't thrilled about. His eyes would glaze over when I talked, and he'd check his phone during our forced family dinners, but he was polite enough. And Mom seemed happy, so I tried to be cool about it. 6 months into their relationship, Mom started talking about marriage, not asking my opinion, just casually mentioning it, like she was describing the weather. "Richard thinks we should get married next spring. Richard wants to buy a bigger house. Richard says we should join the country club." Everything was, Richard says, Richard thinks, Richard wants, like she'd outsourced her entire personality to a man she'd known for half a year. The engagement came 3 months later. Richard proposed at a fancy restaurant, gave her a ring that probably cost more than our car. Mom called me from the parking lot, voice all high and excited. "Lakesha, are you happy for me?" What was I supposed to say? That I thought she was rushing? That I missed the mom who wore sweatpants and made pancakes on Sunday mornings, instead of this new version who wore designer heels and talked about investment portfolios? I swallowed everything and said, "Congratulations." She thanked me and said we'd talk more when she got home, but she was already mentally checked out. I could hear Richard in the background saying, "Let's go celebrate," like I was a quick errand to cross off before the real night began. That was when things started changing fast. Real fast. Richard had 2 kids from his first marriage, Sophia, 13, and Brandon, 10. They lived with their mom most of the time and visited Richard every other weekend and holidays. I'd met them once, briefly, at one of those awkward dinners where everyone pretends they're comfortable. Sophia spent the entire meal on her phone. Brandon talked nonstop about video games. Richard kept correcting their table manners like he was managing employees instead of raising children. After the engagement, Mom started talking about blending families, how we'd all be siblings soon, how amazing it would be to have a bigger family, how Richard's kids were so excited to have me as a sister. That was a lie. Sophia and Brandon weren't excited. They barely noticed I existed. The wedding happened that spring. Small ceremony at the country club, mostly Richard's business associates and country club friends. A few of Mom's coworkers showed up, but most of our old family friends weren't invited. Richard wants to keep it intimate, Mom explained, which apparently meant intimate with people who owned boats and vacation homes, not intimate with people who had known us when we were eating boxed mac and cheese and laughing anyway. I wore a dress Mom picked out and stood there during the ceremony smiling for photos. In every picture, I was on the edge of the frame while Richard's kids were front and center. One photo shows Mom and Richard with Sophia and Brandon between them, looking like a magazine ad for blended families. I'm cropped out of that one entirely. Mom posted it anyway. After the wedding, we moved into Richard's house. The place was massive, like something from a home improvement show. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a finished basement, a backyard with a pool, and a neighborhood gate with a security guard who checked IDs. Mom made it sound like a dream. "You'll have your own room with your own bathroom," she said, smiling like she'd won something. Isn't that great? My new room was at the end of the upstairs hallway, basically as far from the master bedroom as physically possible, while still being in the same house. It was bigger than my old room, yes, but it felt sterile. Beige walls, generic furniture, nothing personal. Like a hotel room someone had forgotten to check into. Sophia got the room next to the master bedroom. Brandon's room was across the hall from hers. Both their rooms were already decorated with their stuff, posters, trophies, personalized bedding. Little details that made it clear this was their space. Mine looked like nobody lived there. "We can decorate however you want," Mom said, but her tone had that familiar later in it. Later never came. That summer, the pattern started. Richard's kids came over every weekend, and suddenly the house revolved around them. Their activities, their schedules, their preferences for dinner and TV shows, and even the pool temperature. I'd suggest watching a movie, but Sophia wanted to watch her show. I'd want to swim, but Brandon needed the pool for his friends. Everything became about accommodating them, while I was expected to just adapt. Mom started spending all her time with Sophia. Shopping trips, spa days, mother-daughter lunches at the country club. Things Mom and I used to do together became their thing. When I mentioned feeling left out, Mom frowned at me like I'd said something embarrassing. "You should be happy I'm bonding with my new stepdaughter," she said. "This is what blended families do. Lakeshia, we're making everyone feel included." Except I didn't feel included. I felt replaced. Sophomore year hit, and the differences became impossible to ignore. Richard's kids went to Westfield Academy, this private school that cost more per year than most people made. I stayed at Lincoln High, my public school. When I asked about switching so we'd all be together, Richard barely looked up from his phone. "Westfield's tuition is already stretched with 2 kids," he said. Mom jumped in quickly, smiling too hard. "But we can definitely look into it for junior year." We never looked into it. Richard's kids got new designer backpacks, the latest smartphones, laptops for homework. I got told my 3-year-old laptop was perfectly fine and I should be grateful. When I pointed out the double standard, Mom's voice went sharp. "Sophia and Brandon are used to a certain lifestyle," she said. "It would be cruel to change that." "Oh, what about my lifestyle?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "You're adaptable." Translation, you're less important. Family dinners became a performance. Richard would ask Sophia about dance classes, Brandon about soccer, and then launch into conversations about private school events and country club gossip. Then he'd glance at me like he remembered I was there and ask, "How's school?" in a tone that felt like checking a box. Mom would occasionally jump in with, "Lakeshia made honor roll," or "Lakeshia did great on that project, but it sounded rehearsed," like she was reading lines from a script titled, "How to Include the Kid from Before." The worst part wasn't the money or the house or the gifts. It was watching my mother transform into someone I didn't recognize. She stopped cooking the meals Dad taught her, started ordering from expensive restaurants or having meal kits delivered. Our old traditions disappeared. No more movie nights because Richard didn't like wasting time on films. No more breakfast for dinner because Richard said it was unsophisticated. No more camping trips because Richard's idea of roughing it was a 4-star hotel without a spa. I tried talking to Mom one night, quietly, in the kitchen, while the dishwasher hummed and the house felt too big around us. "I miss us," I said. "I miss our life." Her eyes flashed like I'd insulted her. "I'm building a new life, Lakeshia," she said. "This is good for all of us. Richard provides stability and opportunities we never had. You need to be more grateful and less selfish." Selfish, because missing my mom made me selfish. That night, lying in my sterile room at the end of the hallway, I stared at the ceiling and realized something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't adjusting. This was replacement happening in slow motion, and everyone else was pretending it was love. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet countdown started, even though I didn't know the exact date yet. Junior year was when the illusion completely shattered. By then, I understood the rules of Richard's house. Smile, Adapt. Don't ask for too much. Don't disrupt the image. The renovation started that fall. Richard decided the kitchen needed marble counters, new appliances, custom cabinets. The master bedroom got remodeled. A home gym was installed. Brandon mentioned wanting a game room, and within weeks the basement had a giant television, surround sound, every gaming console imaginable. My room still had beige walls. When I casually asked Mom if we could at least paint it, she said, "Let's not create extra expenses right now." The same week, Richard paid to upgrade the pool lighting. Christmas that year made everything undeniable. Sophia opened a designer handbag squealing, then a brand new laptop, then jewelry. Brandon got a custom gaming PC, expensive headphones, collector's edition games, and sports equipment. I opened a box with a sweater and a $100 gift card. "Practical gifts are sometimes the best," Mom said, clapping her hands together too brightly. I watched Sophia disappear upstairs with thousands of dollars in presents while I sat there holding plastic. Later that night, I found Mom in the kitchen. "Did you notice the difference?" I asked quietly. Her expression tightened instantly. "Richard's ex-wife has certain expectations for her kids," she said. "We need to respect that." "What about my expectations?" "You're almost an adult, Lakeisha. Material things shouldn't matter so much. Apparently, they only mattered if you were biologically Richard's." After that, I stopped trying. I stayed late at school, joined clubs I barely cared about, picked up a part-time job at a local hardware store, anything to avoid going home to that massive house where I felt like an inconvenient reminder of Mom's first life. My best friend Kevin noticed. We'd been close since middle school, and he could read me like a book. After I canceled plans 3 weekends in a row because of family stuff, he cornered me at lunch. "What's going on with you?" he asked. I told him everything. The favoritism, the school difference, the way Mom barely looked at me unless Richard was watching. Kevin listened without interrupting. Then he said something that lodged itself in my chest. "Your mom chose her new family over you. That sucks. But at least now you know where you stand. Stop waiting for her to remember you exist and start planning your exit." Planning my exit. The phrase stuck. That was when I started thinking seriously about my 18th birthday. Dad had left me $200,000 in a trust fund. Mom was the trustee until I turned 18, but she couldn't touch it, except for approved education expenses. I'd always thought of it as college money. Now it felt like freedom. I started researching apartments near the state university 3 hours away. I made spreadsheets: rent, utilities, tuition, food. I saved every paycheck from the hardware store. Meanwhile, home life kept tightening around me. Mom barely talked to me unless Richard was nearby, and she needed to perform motherhood. She'd ask surface-level questions, nod without listening, then pivot to planning Sophia's Sweet 16 or Brandon's birthday trip. Brandon's 11th birthday was a spectacle. Richard rented out a section of Disneyland, hired photographers, custom shirts, easily $10,000 spent on a kid who would forget most of it within months. My 16th birthday, Mom baked a cake. Richard handed me a $50 bill and left early because Sophia had dance practice. The real breaking point came a month before my 18th birthday. They called a family meeting. We gathered in the formal living room, the one no one ever used unless Richard wanted to display success. He cleared his throat like he was announcing quarterly earnings. "We have exciting news," he said. "We're officially adopting Sophia and Brandon." Mom beamed. "We'll all share the same last name. The paperwork's almost finalized." Sophia and Brandon looked thrilled. I felt cold. "What about me?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "What about you?" Richard replied carefully. "Am I part of this?" "You're already my wife's daughter," he said. "It's different." Mom jumped in quickly. "You have your father's last name. We thought you'd want to keep it." They hadn't asked, hadn't discussed, just decided I would remain separate. "We can talk about it if you really want," she added, but her tone made it clear she hoped I wouldn't. I didn't push, because in that moment, something inside me went very still. They weren't building a blended family. They were building a new one, and I wasn't in the blueprint. The adoption finalized in early March. Richard threw a party at the country club. There was a cake that said, "Welcome to the Lawson family." Sophia and Brandon received monogrammed gifts with their new last name. I stood in the corner, eating shrimp cocktail and counting down days until my birthday. 3 days. 2. 1. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just waited. My 18th birthday fell on a Thursday. I woke up that morning with a strange, steady calm. No balloons, no big breakfast, just a card on the kitchen counter with $100 inside and a note from Mom. "We'll celebrate this weekend." We both knew that meant squeeze between Sophia's dance competition and Brandon's soccer practice. I didn't go to school. Instead, I drove to the bank with my birth certificate, my ID, and the trust fund documents I'd been quietly studying for months. 2 hours later, the $200,000 Dad left me was sitting in an account only I controlled. The bank manager, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, handed me the paperwork. "Big day?" she asked. "The biggest," I said. "Next stop, the apartment complex near campus. I'd already been approved pending deposit. I handed over a certified check for first month, last month, and security deposit. They gave me keys. The apartment was small, one bedroom, thin carpet, plain white walls. It was perfect. I spent the rest of the day moving. I didn't have much. When we moved into Richard's house, most of our old furniture had been sold or donated. What I owned fit into my car: clothes, laptop, some books, and a box of Dad's photos I'd kept hidden in my closet. 3 years in that mansion, and I was leaving with less than I arrived with. By 6 o'clock, I was sitting on the floor of my empty apartment eating pizza with Kevin. "You actually did it," he said, grinning. "Yeah, your mom's going to lose it." "Probably." At 8:02 p.m., I sent the text. "Moved out. I'm good. Don't worry about me." 5 minutes later. "What do you mean moved out? Where are you?" "Lakeshia, answer me." Then the calls started. I silenced my phone. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and over 100 texts. Confusion, anger, guilt, threats, then guilt again. Richard's messages were short and sharp, disrespectful, ungrateful. "After everything we've done for you." Moms were frantic. "Please come home. We need to talk. You can't just abandon your family." Home. That house had never felt like home. I sent one reply. "I'm an adult. I have my own place. I'm fine. I'll talk when I'm ready." Then I blocked both of them. Clean break. For 2 weeks, it was quiet. I worked full-time at the hardware store, bought secondhand furniture. Kevin's parents gave me a couch. His mom invited me over for dinner twice a week, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was when Uncle Greg called. "Your mom is losing her mind," he said without preamble. "I'm not hiding," I replied. "I just moved out." "I know. I told her you're an adult. She's not handling it well." "She didn't handle being my mother well for 3 years. She'll survive." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." That meant more than he probably realized. 3 weeks later, Greg called again. "You need to hear something," he said. I had dinner at their house. My stomach tightened. They're having financial issues. The adoption triggered some legal complications with Richard's ex-wife. Increased child support, about $3,000 more a month. I said nothing. "There's more," Greg continued carefully. "Your mom mentioned they were planning to use your trust fund for part of the renovations. Said it was family money, since you live there." I went very still. "They were counting on it," he added. "When you transferred it, it messed up their plans." So that was it. Not just emotional replacement. Financial expectation. There's one more thing," Greg said. "Your room? It's a home office now. They painted it, installed cabinets, your remaining stuff. Your mom said you took what you wanted, and they donated the rest." The rest? Childhood photos. Dad's fishing hat I'd hidden in a drawer. Old journals. Gone. I felt anger rise, but underneath it was something sharper. Relief. There was no going back now. In April, Mom emailed my school account. Long paragraphs about how hurt she was, how I'd blindsided her, how families don't abandon each other. I replied with one sentence. "You abandoned me 3 years ago. I just made it official." She wrote back instantly. Pages of justification. How blending families was hard. How I hadn't tried enough. How I'd been distant. In her version of events, I was the problem. I didn't respond. There's no point arguing with someone who rewrites history to survive it. Graduation came in May. I invited Uncle Greg, Kevin's family. Not Mom. She found out through social media. The next day, she showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. I opened it. She looked different. No designer dress, no country club polish, hair messy, eyes swollen. "You graduated without telling me," she said. "You didn't seem interested in my life anymore." "How can you say that? I'm your mother." Mothers usually notice when their daughters disappear. She tried stepping inside. I blocked her. "Richard and I are having problems," she said suddenly. "I've realized I made mistakes." There it was. The marriage was cracking. And now she remembered me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Can we fix this?" I looked at her and felt something unfamiliar. Not rage. Not sadness. Distance. "You built a new life," I said quietly. "I wasn't part of it." She started crying. I didn't. Summer arrived heavy and humid. And while my life felt steady for the first time in years, my mother's was coming apart at the seams. Uncle Greg kept me updated, even when I didn't ask. "Richard's business isn't as solid as he claimed," he told me one evening. "The increased child support after the adoption hit harder than expected, Their cutting expenses. Country club visits slowed. The cleaning service was gone. Meal deliveries stopped. Sophia was furious about possibly not getting a car for her 16th birthday. Brandon's elite soccer camp, $8,000, was canceled. The perfect family was starting to crack. I listened without reacting. 3 years ago, I would have felt vindicated. Now I just felt removed. In August, a week before I moved to campus housing, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it. Mom stood there with 2 suitcases. "I left Richard," she announced, like it was something heroic. "I need a place to stay for a while." I stared at her. "And you thought you'd stay here?" "You have space," she said, glancing over my shoulder into my 1-bedroom apartment like she was evaluating square footage. "I'm your mother. Of course I thought I would stay here." "No." She blinked. "Lakeshia, I have nowhere else to go." "That's unfortunate." Her face shifted from confidence to disbelief. I don't think it had ever crossed her mind that I might say no. "I made mistakes," she rushed. "I see that now. Richard and I, everything fell apart. I was trying to build a stable life. I thought it was best for you." "It wasn't." She stepped closer. "Families don't turn their backs on each other when things get hard." I let out a slow breath. "You would know." Her mouth trembled. "I was trying to be happy," she said. "After your father died, I was drowning. Richard felt like rescue. And I felt like baggage." "That's not true." "It is." Silence hung between us. "I need you," she whispered. That was the truth underneath everything. Not "I'm sorry," not "I understand," just "I need." "You didn't need me when I was 15, I said quietly. "Or 16, or 17. Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't realize what I was doing." "Yes, you did. You just didn't care because it was convenient." She flinched. "Please," she tried again. "Just for a little while. I'll make it up to you. I'll be better." I shook my head. "I gave you 3 years of chances. You chose Richard's kids every time." She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. So that's it?" she asked. "You're just done with me?" "I was done the day you stopped fighting for me. I'm just honest about it now." For a second, I thought she might argue. Beg harder. Instead, she picked up her suitcases. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, voice barely audible. "You're an adult," I replied. "You'll figure it out." She stood there for another moment, searching my face for something. Pity, guilt, hesitation. She didn't find any. When she finally walked away, I closed the door gently, not slammed. Not dramatic. Just final. An hour later, Uncle Greg called. "She showed up here," he said. "I'm letting her stay temporarily." "That's good." "She's a mess, Lakeshia." "I know." There was a pause. "She says you're being cruel." "I'm being consistent." He didn't argue. The divorce finalized in the fall. Richard had a prenup. Mom walked away with far less than she'd imagined when she married into that gated neighborhood. She moved into a small apartment, went back to full-time work, started over. Richard kept the house, kept his kids, kept his life. Mom had sacrificed her relationship with me for that world. Now she had neither. Thanksgiving came. Uncle Greg invited both of us. I debated going, not to reconcile, just to prove I wasn't hiding. I showed up with Kevin. Mom was in the kitchen helping Greg's wife. When she saw me, her face lit up like she'd been handed oxygen. "You came," she said. "Greg invited me." The light dimmed slightly. Dinner was awkward. She kept trying to start conversations about school, about my apartment, about whether I needed anything. I gave polite, short answers. After dessert, she cornered me in the hallway. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. "There's nothing to talk about." "Well, we can fix this." "We're not broken," I said. "We're just finished." Her hand went to her chest like I'd physically hurt her. "I'm your mother." "That's biology," I replied. "Family is choice." She stared at me, stunned. "I choose peace," I added. "And peace doesn't include going backward." She didn't argue this time. Maybe because deep down she knew I was right. I moved onto campus the week after that Thanksgiving. 3 hours away from the house that never felt like mine. 3 hours away from beige walls and polite indifference. 3 hours away from waiting to matter. University felt like oxygen. I majored in civil engineering. I worked hard. I joined clubs. I stayed up too late studying and laughing and living. Kevin visited on weekends sometimes, crashing on my couch like nothing had changed except the zip code. Uncle Greg called once a week. Mom tried reaching out through email. Long apologies at first, then shorter ones, then simple messages. "I hope you're doing well. I'm proud of you. I miss you." I never responded. Not because I was angry, because I was done reopening wounds that had already scarred over. The divorce was finalized before Christmas of my freshman year. Richard kept the house, kept custody arrangements exactly as they were, kept his reputation. Mom got a small settlement and a 1-bedroom apartment. Poetic, really. She'd traded our modest, paid-off home for a mansion that was never hers. traded her daughter for a last name that didn't stay. And in the end, she was back where she started, except this time I wasn't waiting in the living room. Sophomore year, I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop near campus. She recognized me immediately. Lake Shia, hey. We did the awkward small talk dance, classes, dorm life, weather. Then she said it. Your mom misses you. She talks about you sometimes when she comes by to see my dad. She says she messed up. That's nice, I replied. Don't you ever think about giving her another chance? No, she blinked. She's your mom. She stopped being my mom when she chose you guys over me. She flinched slightly. That's harsh. It's honest. We didn't run into each other again. Senior year came fast. Job offers followed. I accepted a position 5 hours away, good salary, benefits, clean slate. Uncle Greg threw me a small graduation party. Kevin's family came. My college friends showed up. Mom asked if she could attend. Greg told me it was my call. I thought about it longer than I expected to. Part of me wanted to prove something, to show her I had succeeded without her. But I also knew she'd try to weave herself into the narrative, try to stand next to me in photos like she'd been part of the climb. And no, I told Greg, this day is mine. The party was perfect. Kevin's mom cried during Greg's speech. My friends teased me. I laughed harder than I had in years. That night, Mom texted, "Congratulations on graduating. I'm proud of you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I locked my phone. I'm 21 now. I live in a downtown apartment in a city that doesn't know my history. I wake up early. I go to work. I build things that stand. Kevin visits sometimes. Uncle Greg still calls every Sunday. Mom sends an email once in a while. They're softer now, less desperate, more resigned. She's dating again, Greg says. Taking things slow this time. No rushing into country clubs, no gated neighborhoods. I hope she learned something. I just don't need to be part of the lesson. People ask sometimes if I'll ever forgive her. But forgiveness isn't the point. I'm not carrying anger. I'm carrying peace. And peace for me means this. Biology makes you related. Choice makes you family. And I chose myself.